Okay, I think we're just on. Let's just do it. Let's just do it. I don't know where it's gonna take us, but hi, David. Good to see you again. Although I see you every single day.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, we work together, and it's we just had this idea to record a podcast because we had so many things to talk about. We talk about them daily, offline, and it'd be just a good idea to share these thoughts with the world and see what they think about what we think about. So, very short, say something about yourself, David.
Well, I'm David, or Dawid if you fancy Polish.
Yep.
I'm the product manager at NerdCow. I oversee our amazing processes and we make them better every single day. I do SEO. I like writing content. So that's nice. They are neatly tied together. Yeah, I do lots of things. We are small, nimble. We still have multiple hats on.
Yeah.
You can't see them, but we do.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? When you run this small business, you have to wear multiple hats.
But I guess mostly product, making sure that we deliver value.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's beauty in wearing multiple hats for the sake of exploration, I think. So when you don't know what you want to do, you just wear multiple hats and see which one sticks.
Yeah, true.
I think.
Yeah, I've heard about a company. They set up a company a guy and a woman. They set up a company, media company actually, and they just decided. Well, they were agile, obviously. So We'll get to that probably later on. But they decided to have a company, and they slapped a job role on the woman. Creative director, and a few days later they printed business cards. That was like 2002. I don't know. They printed all the business cards, and then they're like, what actually does the creative director do? Is that something you want to do? Yeah, and so she grew into the role, but they didn't know what the role meant. They just went with it. So, kind of similar.
I guess so. The one thing that comes to my mind is I'm watching now For All Mankind on Apple TV Plus, and there's this company that is clearly built on the public image of Tesla company that we know in real world, and they too are very much involved in exploration of Mars, and this company is far ahead of what we know as Tesla right now, SpaceX to be honest, and there's this ethos in that company that there's no titles, no division, no like everything is equal. Even the CEO, they're called Helios, the company, and there's it's just so flat, like a piece of paper.
Like holacracy, right? That's the concept, I think.
What's the name?
It's holacracy.
Really?
HOLIA-crasy.
I never heard about it.
Yeah, so everyone is equal and employees own the company, basically.
Right. Okay.
Interesting.
Well, is that a fantasy or is that doable?
People claim to have done it. I didn't explore it deeply enough, but that's a concept that exists, and people try to create companies like that. Even they want to support employees. Well, they want to have the company for life, basically. That's kind of the idea. Maybe not holacracy itself, but that's similar concept. And they come from a place that they want to support employees even if they leave. So it's not that they don't have legal agreements for that yet, but they have an idea to have legal agreements that they kind of will support you if you go do your own business out of the company that you left, and they will support you if they can. That's actually a really abstract concept. It's hard.
It's interesting. So my thoughts are, I've very recently looked into a couple of California-based companies, and it seems like California is this roots of work culture, and that spreads to the rest of the world. But I looked in a couple of companies that how they recruit, how they treat employees, and what's it like to work for them, and they definitely steer towards that direction to actually have everyone like 140% happy kind of thing. And it's funny because, well, you will know the listeners won't know that we work with a company that is so far behind with everything because they have no competitors as much, and there's no need, there's no drive to grow and change. They're stuck in the old ways. There's this heavy hierarchy, decision made chain of, it's like making any kind of dent in their worldview is just crazy difficult. And then you look on the other side, you have those, Hotjar, Asana, and Google. Like pick the company from California, like anyone really from US, and they're like 100 years ahead of them. So there's still, I guess, a huge gap to close, and I appreciate companies trying to, swim from one end to the other. I don't know where we are. Somewhere we're small on the way, definitely on the way. Yeah, I like that, on the way. So, but yeah, this is how I see it, and I guess we can easily dive into the. I don't want to say topic of this episode because the goal of those chats is not necessarily to have a topic; it's just to cover what's on our minds. But we discussed to touch a bit about Agile.
Yeah, definitely.
I think
that's what we do.
That's what we do.
That's the on the way part. Yeah,
that is on the way part, and it's one of few things that we do. But I think Agile is the huge, this kind of backbone for everything that we do. But I don't want to stick to the theme of NerdCow here. It's not the point. No. I just want to take it a bit beyond and discuss the concept and the theme itself of working in this period of Agile. So, estimates. Estimates is it's been lately on our minds. Yeah. Because we had a few interactions with clients and prospects that didn't quite get how estimates work in Agile, and they were very much used to working in the waterfall method, which, for listeners who don't know, it's quite rigid. I would even risk and say old-fashioned framework of working, where you plan ahead pretty much everything, which is already a bit silly. Yeah, you can't expect unexpected, but they still do that, and there's no. They strip themselves of opportunity for learning. They honestly, because what happened is they plan for a few months or whatever the project is. There might be a month, might be 3 months of research and planning. They commit, they build it for the next 12 months, and when they release it, probably delayed
16 months later.
Right? Yeah, exactly. 16 months later, it just happens to be complete shite, right? Because they haven't re-evaluated their views, ideas, assumptions on the way, and they had they had just sailed on that notion of having the initial scope, assuming it's right, assuming it's good, market will like it, I know it for sure, I've been in that business for 20 years and I know what it's like, I know my people, let's do it, and then it just fails, and then they look for parties to blame. So Agile goes completely against that.
Yeah, it's a bit complex because those old processes, I don't like them. We couldn't work like that. Well, we did work like that, and that's where we had projects that lasted 6 months. Now the longest that we have is probably the current one. It's like 12 weeks, supposed to be 12 weeks total.
I think it is.
And that's the longest by far. We did 3 weeks previously compared to 6 months. That's crazy. Similar scope, basically. But recently I was listening to a podcast as well, and it made me think, because sometimes the way people work comes from a good place, I guess. Definitely the people lower down, obviously it all goes from top to bottom. But if you have a bigger company and you have someone that you have a point of contact at that company, they will often have processes imposed on them. They might want to change, but they can't change really. They're used to working like that. So I guess last time we did user tests, people mentioned that in their role they need empathy, and we kind of need that as well a bit. But what you said is perfect about those delays, those estimates. Like it's impossible to estimate, especially software development, and even I'd say anything. Like I don't know if it's proven as a fact, but people just suck at estimating. Like you can ask your family about it. When was the last time you've said you will be ready in 15 minutes and you weren't ready in 15 minutes to leave? You can't estimate that, and how do you want to estimate something that is unknown, basically, like development? It's just impossible. I don't think you can do it. So yeah. Another thing that I have on my mind is that in that waterfall process, people basically work in iterations already. They just don't see that. It just blurs for them. You can take content creation as an example. Usually they will put out content, they will give it to us, and we have that content ready to go live, but they're like, no, we need to tweak that. So they will make 7 changes, then they will make another 7 changes, another 5 changes. You have 4 iterations on the way before it's perfect. It's not perfect, obviously. So in a way, they already work in iterations. So they just need to realize that and take advantage of that, get the value from those iterations, right?
Yeah, I think it directly ties into the agile mindset a bit.
Yeah.
And I think mindset itself of an individual, but also of the organization. So I imagine a few companies that we worked with, even if the contact point for us gets agile, people above them don't.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like hitting a wall.
Yeah, it has to be from top to bottom.
Exactly. It has to be
no other way.
Changing the culture. What do you think is the best way to get started? So imagine you are that person in that company. Where do you go? Like, how do you start that change?
I think I just have a critical look at how we work. It's hard to have data on that, and those transitions to agile take years, like depending on the size of the company, obviously. But at enterprises, that's like 3+ years probably. Wow. Before you can be agile.
3+ years.
Yeah, usually. Yeah, I think so. Maybe 2, but yeah, usually it's years. It's not like flick of a finger. Yeah. It's taken us some time actually, and we are small. So, and agile as bare bones agile, like just the manifesto, it doesn't really scale well with the size of company. So usually you would start with one team, but yeah, it has to be a mindset change at first. And I'm not sure how those people realize that if you are that CEO that has been in the business for 20 years, you are successful, and you need to embrace change suddenly, and that change might be even guaranteed to be for good, but with change you always have loss. So you will lose something if you change, and people are scared of losing shit. So it's really hard. It's very personal, I would say, because you are in that role 20 years, profitable, you have a good life, let's say, and suddenly you want to change that, but you're afraid you will lose that control that you have, that you tell people do that. You won't have that same like feature mindset that creates that, not solve a problem. You tell them to create that. You lose that control. You lose, I guess, safety a little bit, because you don't know how it will play out. You even if you take like a 90% bet, you still have 10% chance to fail. And maybe you're just too scared to do that because that's your legacy for 20 years. So it's hard. So it really has to be an inner fight, I would say. It's just to not be afraid. I think that's the biggest starting point.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, it comes as no surprise that change is difficult to people. Like any kind of change. Like from the smallest, like even changing the shoes brand is a challenge, because you need to challenge your loyalty and your principles, etc., right? So speaking of a company that's been run for 20 years by a guy, that's a hell of a habit to have.
True.
And to shake that a bit up is that might not go well, at least from that guy's perspective. So assuming we have someone in marketing that is pro agile 100%, right? And there's the CEO that's full old-fashioned traditionalist. How do you close that gap, that void? What do you think?
With results, probably. You need to earn the trust first. If you have that trust, then you start small scale, one project, maybe one team, depending on the size of your business. Sometimes you have to be really low scale. If you build something in 1 week that you used to take 2 months to build, and it's not performing worse, then I think that's an obvious improvement. You can actually always talk to users as well, that they will tell you what they need, and then maybe you will realize that you've been building a feature for 2 months or a product even, but then you talk to people and actually you notice that what they need, you had what they need at month 1 basically. So you spend double the time for no reason practically.
It's I guess it's very interesting that you mentioned that. So again, going back to a few projects that we did, and so listeners, just so you know, we built websites. I don't know if we mentioned that, but it's not the point. So we had this realization, me and David, very lately, that none of the clients that we ever had really gone for an MVP, like properly, and we're still thinking how to make that happen, because that's not the success of our company or of the clients, but it's just the success of the entire sort of business model, right? The entire project management idea. If someone buys into the concept of having that minimum viable product out there as soon as possible, that's a huge win for literally everyone. Users benefit from it, their business benefit, we benefit from it, and everyone is sort of happy and aligned. And I always wonder, what stops people from doing that? What do you think that is?
I think that's, again, fear. Probably. Fear of losing control, of disappointing someone somehow. It's not always certain what the outcome will be. Again, you might have 90% chance, but you still have 10% chance to fail, as an example. Yeah, I think fear, and in the last example, I think it was also a bit of a fear to disappoint people. The last time we've heard that we won't go for an MVP, it was a bit of that. I think it all circles back to the change, and it might be imposed by the powers that be as well. So you want to go live, as personally you want to go live right now, but then you're like, oh no, but we can't go live because, I don't know, Fred will tell us to polish the content or add a feature that we don't even need.
We on the last call we had with an existing client, we asked them point blank, why won't they launch as is? And can you remind me what the answer was? Because I think the higher ups weren't ready, right? Yeah. So that kind of circles back to the argument that we have at the beginning of this chat, that people are just it needs to happen top to bottom.
It's in that deadline and feature mindset, and if you work towards a deadline, then the deadline owns you basically, and the feature that you envisaged owns you. You're not working for the user, you're pumping out features, you're not even thinking what the user needs. And sometimes, again, that's uncertain, so why would you do that? You just take a gamble of, you assume that it will work, but maybe it doesn't, and sometimes you will be lucky and it does work because you have some business acumen, whatever. You've been doing it for 20 years, you probably won't put out something that fails completely.
Right.
It might be good enough, or you might break even at worst, maybe some small loss, you won't even notice that because it's probably very intangible to you. Maybe it's a small part of a business. The business grows, but the one department just drags it down a little, so you won't notice that. There's a lot of factors that come into play, I think, and I would say the fear is the biggest fear of loss, basically.
Right. So the question is how we overcome that fear, right? That's a huge one.
Yeah, it's a huge one, and I think you would need a proper coach for that, which I am not. It just came naturally to me. I don't know. Others will struggle with that. It will depend, and people have different motivations.
I mean, you work out in the gym, right? And that is sort of agile way of. I mean, you probably could have reached for some kind of injections and muscle pumps, right? But you just didn't. You just do increments. You measure yourself. You weigh yourself. You check what sort of supplements protocol works for you, what doesn't work, and you kind of learn and go, right?
Yeah, and we always worked like that.
Yeah,
people don't realize that
it's just natural.
If you were in the Middle Ages and you were about to be invaded, would you build a perfect castle like you've dreamt of? No, you would build something that saves your ass, basically.
Yeah, anything.
So, and then you will build on top of that, and then you have airport stadiums right now. They are expanded and they are still functional. You can work iteratively, and we are working iteratively across the globe. We've been working like that for thousands of years. So why the waterfall? It's hard for me to grasp. I'm trying, but it's really a case of mindset, of personal beliefs, and the fear. I think fear is the biggest one.
One thing, if you remember, in our previous office, there was this rooftop, and we used to observe how they built the building, right? The student accommodation out there. It was so obvious, like, it's agile, man. I know
a bit,
there must have been some kind of research and architecture planning going. I mean, once you set it up, I imagine. I mean, if someone is into construction, knows more than me, then correct me if I'm wrong. But I imagine once you build a wall, especially with cement and something really heavy, it's not like timber or anything, something like solid, you can't really move. Change.
It's not fully agile, but you see the agile concept.
Yeah, exactly. You could see layers of the building coming together from left to right, like a progress bar. It was amazing.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things about agile. I think it's not a framework. Scrum is a framework. You have rules, and if you don't follow them, you are not Scrum. You're not doing Scrum, but you can do half of Scrum, and you are still agile. And in a way, if you take agile frameworks, ideas, like most of them, probably like 90% of every single framework is overlaps heavily, and that 10% is the difference. So you can really pick and choose what works for you. And it's the entry point isn't that hard. You just need to make that first step, and that's always the hardest. Again, for the reasons we've discussed, but it's not a hard step to take. I think from like process standpoint, you can take a single Agile manifesto point and implement that. Just you don't even need to start with iterations. Maybe just go for technical excellence at first, because often with Agile also people have an easy way out, and they say, well, the iterations will be like a Frankenstein product. It's not. You can't pick one thing from the Agile manifesto and start working on that, but it doesn't happen in separation. That they work together. You don't do an iteration. That's crap. You're not Agile in that case. So there's a lot of those. It's again fear, I think, because you're afraid to put something that is not good enough. You don't know how Agile works as your first step. You have no idea what to do, and you need to be brave to do less. I think that's also one of the interesting points about Agile, because in the short term you are doing less.
I'm thinking silly situation from actually a couple of situations that comes to my mind from my personal life, and I guess that relates to many people. Like, imagine you live with parents, right? You're early in your life, and you have to get into some kind of work and pattern of life that normal adults live, right? You have to leave the parents' house and get on with life. You don't just buy a mansion, right?
Yeah.
Or you don't buy a villa with 4 bedrooms. Even let's assume you can afford that, right? Because you're rich. I don't know, but you're probably better off renting a room first of all, learning what you like about that room, and maybe if you hate living with people, that would be you're learning from that experience. And then going on, you have to at least rent a studio flat so you have no people around. And that studio flat might give you extra learnings like, damn, I hate this brand of washing machine. I can't get it for myself when I move out, right? And then you get to some kind of central flat in London, let's say, and man, I can't stand this noise. And then that's another learning. So by then you have accumulated so many observations, then you eventually end up in a place where you're happy because you had this journey. Another situation is I am kind of a victim of thinking in a waterfall model because I kind of had my early professional life deeply ingrained in waterfall because I worked for agencies that kind of followed that model, right? But my partner challenges me all the time about it. And that's kind of silly because I keep teaching her about Agile, but I don't walk the walk, right? And she's like, Thomas, but you said that and that. I'm like, yeah, you're right, damn it. And I'm just a bit embarrassed. But what I'm getting is we have a kitchen which we hate. Like, honestly, we bought a flat and that kitchen is absolutely terrible. It's misaligned and not practical at all, and it's just mess to use. Nothing makes sense in there. So we were looking at rebuilding that kitchen, and the bill was like 15 grand to redo the whole thing, and we don't even know what we like and what we don't like. We know that we don't like this kitchen, but what it is that we actually need from that kitchen, we don't know, right? So we decided to take a step back and approach that in iterations. And the first thing we did, okay, look, this small under-the-counter fridge is just too small. Like, we can't fit food in there, honestly. We would have food laying around on the counter and just going bad. So, okay, let's replace the fridge. But we don't have the room for the large fridge because all the walls are taken and there's just no space. By the way, it's a top floor flat, so we have a slant roof, so it's a bit difficult. But regardless, we bought a fridge that we liked, okay? So we got the fridge, and then there's a question, okay, where we put it? Well, if we cut this counter end here, we can sort of squeeze it against the wall in the corner. Okay, let's just do it. So we took a saw, we cut this bastard off, we put that fridge in, and now we have a fridge. But then there's a gap under the counter after the old fridge. Oh, wow. We need the washing machine. Okay, there we go. The gap is plugged. We have 2 improvements to quality of life. And there it is. So now we think into adding something extra to the kitchen step by step, and it's just how we renovate the kitchen. And frankly, we didn't even spend like 500 quid on it yet. And we already have a fridge that we can use. Food is saved. We have dishwasher. Dishwasher. I didn't mean washing machine. Dishwasher from the get-go. So we have dishwasher that saves water, saves my time, my partner's time, and we are all that better off, right? So if we had spent another, I don't know, half a year saving 15 grand or whatever, we probably never got to benefit from those 2 simple improvements. We literally did that in 1 week.
Yeah.
Right? So just take a step back, take it easy, break it down, and think about the problem that you have. Our problem is that kitchen is just not usable. We don't like cooking in it. We don't know where things are because the storage is a bit off. Let's fix it, organize it. Let's make sure it works for us. Okay, what's the first step that we can do that's within the reach now and won't impact long-term goal or the sort of stability of that venture, let's say, right? And literally that's what we did. So again, take it easy. Break it down step by step, right? Don't dive into it and think that you know it all, because you don't. And life will surprise you, and you have to be reactive and adaptive to what life throws at you, I think. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that when you do it like you did it, you will get to the point where you get that dream kitchen. Yeah. If you go in iterations, you will always get to that satisfaction. And if you start with focusing on being perfect, then you will never get to frequent iterations. You will be owned by the deadline still. You will have that 15K 1 year to save it, then half a year to have it happen because the deadlines are huge for those handyman things. It's impossible to improve that way. You won't learn. And with that mansion, again, maybe you will buy that mansion and maybe that's not for you.
Yeah.
And maybe you will buy that mansion and you will love it, but then you won't know what kind of dishwasher to get, as you've mentioned. And when you take it step by step, you will always get to that end goal. I think so that's a big thing. Just take that first step and just acknowledge that you might not need that mansion.
Yeah, and I think it's especially useful for people that are a bit lost on what they want. And because this Agile allows you to experiment and learn very frequently.
Yeah, and another example is probably just perfection, like daily life again. I don't have a better example, so you'll hate me for that, but cars. When you go to buy a brand new car, you have all those options, extras. If you go in there and you tell them to give you a fully decked out car, and if you look back after 2 years, you probably haven't used like a third of those features. You don't need them. You just got them because you thought that's perfect. That's what you want.
That's cool. Yeah.
So you don't even know for yourself what's the best for you. You can live without, I don't know, cooled or heated cups in the car. You just maybe commute every single day. You don't need that. You won't go. It's unlikely that you will go for the fully decked out car. So why would you go for the fully decked out product in business? Like it's basically the same.
I also can't really imagine why would you aim for perfection. Like so that kind of like kind. It sort of goes into the topic of value that we wanted to touch on, and what's value in perfection?
Yeah, I think is basically your own
it's
subjective opinion.
Exactly, subjective self-satisfaction, narcissistic drive. Because I think there's really there's this adage that says, perfect kills progress, and that it's really true.
Yeah, you can see that in a daily life, you'll never be perfect with anything. No. You can improve. That's the biggest value of Agile, continuous improvement. You can work towards perfection, but if you start aiming for perfection, you won't get there, basically, and you will miss those iteration benefits. You will have that fridge for a year now, and you wouldn't have it for another year. Yeah. You will be miserable for a year. You can place value to both of those things, even the water from dishwasher. Even you can assign monetary value to that.
Absolutely,
and then you'll pretty much learn that it was the best decision ever.
Yeah. So I did this quick calculation that the dishwasher uses about 11 liters of water per program per washing, and I put it on once a day in the evening. If I washed those dishes by hand, I'll probably use tenfold of that water. Not to mention gas, because I have gas boiler to heat up the water in the tap and all sorts of and obviously wasted time.
Yeah,
that has monetary value to it, at least in my eyes. I don't know if that's
even if it doesn't, it's still something on top.
Yeah. People forget how precious time is, really. I mean, you can't take a loan on time. Once it's gone, it's just gone. So I think Agile is quite good proxy to make sure you spend that time well, because it that frameworks, those principles at the core, they force you to focus on that value and that problem that you try to solve. And there's nothing better than solving that problem in a way that's the most efficient, right? So my question is, how do we define that value? Like, what's value?
Well, we can start with the measurable things. So that water, you can assign basically monetary value to that. And the intangible value is really hard to estimate. Again, we're going back to estimates a bit. Well, that's the entire point of I think that should be the entire point of estimating, to know the value and the cost. Because if you're estimating just to fit a budget or estimating time because you have a deadline, then you're ruled by money and time. You don't care about user. Yeah, so I think how to put it best. Can you repeat that question again? Maybe that will make my mind.
Yeah. So I'm trying to understand, how do you
define value?
Yeah, how do you define value? So my sense that where my head's going is that it is quite subjective.
It is subjective, right? It depends. Again, maybe value for you is that safety that you have for 20 years. But if you wanna be progressive, if you want to help people,
right,
then you need to solve their problems, not pump out features.
Exactly.
You need to be in touch with the customers. Maybe over those 20 years you were in touch and you've learned things, but things change. You need to unlearn them. And if you are a CEO, I find it hard to believe that you are in touch with customers. That's rarely the case. Maybe select few, maybe your most important customers, but they are not your entire audience, or like
it's not the
representative sample.
It's the sample that's not big enough.
Yeah. So it kind of ties into the concept we also discussed recently, and that's the zero distance between you and the customers. And I've seen an example where agile teams in software development, cycle through customer support once every few iterations. So basically, developers have one iteration when they get the responsibilities of customer support for the entire week or month. And that's how they learn what the problems are, what people struggle with. And that's what you are working towards. You are solving problems in the end. Nobody is buying a car. They are buying faster commute, spacious storage to go shopping, to take your family to vacation. You're not buying a car and 4 wheels.
Yeah. Unless you're vain. Maybe.
Maybe, but then that's we circle back to the.
But then again,
personal,
that's subjective, right?
Yeah.
If someone's value is the beautiful alloy wheels, I kind of
the case of
sympathize.
Morality.
Well, when we discuss building a website with a client, we kick things off with workshops, and the entire goal of those workshops is to find what's valuable to us. Like, what's the problem that we try to solve? And it starts to feel like the value and problem solving is a bit intertwined. Like, you can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
But regardless, those workshops, especially the map exercise that we do, is the cherry on top when we actually get the group to agree what is that effing problem. Because most clients that come to us, they're like, okay, we know we want it. I don't know what it is, but we want it, kind of thing. Yeah. Okay? So it's very vague, and it's great because that's exactly when we step in. That's perfect client for us. But what I'm trying to say is that clients, or just companies in overall, I think if we go beyond that sample of our clients, they tend to have this underlying sense of something being wrong, something being missed, that kind of problem that stops the expansion, progress, or their potential, right? But they don't know what it is. They can't quite put the finger on it. And that's exactly what Agile focuses on. It quickly validates assumptions, tries to fix them, tries to get that problem out of the way. If we make a mistake, it's okay because we do frequent iterations. We frequently check with the customer if what we did was right. If it wasn't, we get feedback. We do it again. As opposed in Waterfall, you would have waited 16 months, as we said at the beginning, to actually get the first checkpoint.
Yeah.
Right? With Agile, you literally can get in touch with your audience whenever you like every week, every other week. Hey, is that okay? No. Okay, back to drawing board. Or at least you get some learnings from it, just like with moving houses or getting that fridge in, right? So circling back to the question of what is the value, I guess value is whatever solves your problem, kind of.
Your customer's problem, ideally.
Your customer's problem, yeah, fair point.
What would you say is the reason people don't know what they need when they come to us? What's at the roots of the problem?
I think it's a misalignment. between team members.
That's a good one, but I also think it's because they don't do iterations.
Oh,
they've had that website for 2 years and nothing changed.
Yeah.
How are they supposed to know if they haven't learned for 2 years?
That's true.
They did zero learning in that period. They didn't try a single A/B test, even like small A/B tests. You can scrap a landing page in 2 days, maybe, or in a week, and just test it.
I keep going back to Hotjar.
Yeah.
Just because, that's what they do for a living. They test things, but they are primary example of how to deal with this kind of customer experience issue and how to make it better. If you ever get to use their services, I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but I'm just frequently checking them out. They constantly change their website. It's honestly, it's a roller coaster. Like honestly, the H1s change, the illustration change, video change, order of sections change, navigation. Like it's still the same look, the same theme, the same brand, same font. Like nothing. It's still Hotjar in its essence, but they try to get it right so much. Like I can't even imagine how many A/B tests they have in the background going. And if you think about all the big boys like Amazon, Dropbox, and any other company, they never replace a website. They get to the bottom of the problem, which then turns into sort of value for the customer, and where the solution at least turns into value, and they fix it. And then that probably opens another window of opportunities and feedback and other smaller maybe issues to solve. And then they proceed from there again. Just keep learning, keep adapting, keep fixing, right? So when I work with other companies that are on the other side of the spectrum, it really kind of annoys me.
Yeah.
It is really annoying because you see the potential they miss out on. They would get stuck on the shape of a button for 2 weeks for absolutely no apparent reason apart from because someone said so, right? If you can prove to me, and I bet you can't, that this shape of the button changes the value for your end customer, like actually it improves value for the end customer, I'll pay you back all the money you spent with us. There's no way the shape of a button makes someone's life better, okay? Unless this shape is somehow related to accessibility, maybe, and that somehow translates into people feeling a bit more comfortable with your brand online.
One example out of many.
Yeah, exactly. We would get requests to enlarge logo because what? Because someone said so. What's the value in it? Well, wasted resources. UPA. So it is subjective, but you can get, so the value is subjective, but it doesn't mean it's always worth respecting, let's say.
Yeah, but then even if you think you need that change and you can push yourself to release an MVP and then make all those changes, why not push out an MVP and then test those changes? If you're right, then you'll be able to pat yourself on the back and use the larger logo. Yeah. If there's no difference, then you would have, in the previous way of working, you would have still done it. So there's resources spent are the same, but you have the validation step. Yeah. So why not do that? Why not just embrace A/B testing or iterations when there are little to no trade-offs. I think again, we've started with that fear, with that personal level of breaking through the barrier of waterfall agile. Yeah. It's all very personal, and that's why it's so hard. Because the logical reasons are very obviously in favor of agile. I mean, again, if you build that perfect product and then you cut off the last iteration and build it anyway, but as an A/B test, then you at least validate that that's good. And if it's not good, you don't do that iteration. You don't put it live. You don't give it to users. And everyone wins, basically. And you lose almost nothing. Setting up an A/B test when you have that code that is probably 5% of the time on top.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there is, I mean, maybe that's because where I sit, but I feel like there's still huge resistance in embracing agile. Like, apart from the software engineering world and all those tech SaaS companies, right? They are purely agile, like in every aspect. All of the other businesses and people that run those companies, maybe they know something we don't. So I'm trying to think when, in what scenario agile doesn't work. Can you think of one?
Yeah, I think as I've mentioned, the large companies like raw agile doesn't scale well with enterprises. So you usually have those teams, and they almost act like different companies, but you obviously within one. So that's a solution, I guess. But also in long-term projects, I think agile isn't that great. Like that building the house, for example, you have that outcome, and once you build that wall, you are not very flexible to change. Sure. So that's outside of development. So I think that the longer it goes, the less value there is in agile, because if you want to spend a year in agile, you probably wouldn't spend much more than a year in waterfall doing the same thing. So I think you just need to pick your battles carefully, and there are agile frameworks that work for larger businesses. There are a lot of them. I think one of them is called Anfix, and they are not even a framework. They just give you those building blocks, more like, so kind of like people imagine development works, that you just pick blocks, now you create things from scratch. But that's off topic. So in that model, you have those building blocks, and if you are small, then you only take some of them that fit you, and if as you grow, you can take more frameworks, I guess, smaller bits and pieces that fit your business. So if you have 5 people, you probably can't afford to have a dedicated Scrum Master, or to have, I don't know, 7 developers and a lawyer on a team, because you only have 5 people in the company. So there are options for you, but I think it just doesn't work when it gets larger and longer. And so that's the challenge. You have to create companies within a company, basically. But that's also healthy, because then you have those teams, and you can never have a monopoly, even internally, on a single thing. If you have a team that does a shit job at development, and then you have 7 others, then you can choose another one, and then the other ones need to catch up, basically. So that always promotes learning and progress and continuous improvement.
Do you mean cross-functional teams? Is that what you're trying to refer to?
Well, the teams should be cross-functional by definition, I guess, of Agile. But if you have, let's say, HR, and you have one HR team, then they have a monopoly, and everyone knows how monopolies work. At some point, you have no competition. You just don't grow, don't improve. And if you would have 2 HR teams, maybe I will go to the other one, because the experience sucked with the first one.
Yeah.
So I will go to a different one. It doesn't have to be agile. Some things can't be agile. Like probably lawyers can exactly be agile. It's really complex, and they probably are a pain for some of the development companies. Like, imagine developing a banking app, and you come up with a feature, and then it can't fly because regulation. So that must be a pain. But yeah, in essence, if you have competition, it's good. You kind of have that capitalism within a single company. So everyone works to be better, and you can always go to another team to do the same thing. So it's almost like you're outsourcing, but within your own company. So you're working with development team that's almost like a separate business, like an agency kind of.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's how you can scale. So I guess if you just go full agile, entire company is a single entity, an agile entity, it won't work well. Those longer projects will struggle. But for websites, it's perfect, and for software development as well.
So, okay, so what you said pretty much is that Agile fails, or might fail. I'm not saying it's like 100% given, but it might fail on the organization scaling sort of level, right? And what about on the project level. So I imagine some projects might actually need quite a lot of research and marketing preparation. Yeah, I guess it all depends on the scope and the client, but I am okay. Let me put it that way. I'm still to see a project that can't be handled in Agile. Maybe life will throw something at me that'll open my eyes. But right now, practically any venture could use could just use often iteration, after learning, often improvement, frequent improvement, and just take it from there.
Yeah, I guess most of the you can always have some of the principles and not all of them in place. But for the longer projects, you've mentioned scope. So I think scope creep exists in waterfall as well, but in Agile, I think it's more dangerous if you have longer projects. Because if that's a longer project, you just build features and other features on top. You create dependencies. Like even with that simple house example, if you have a request to, I don't know, rebuild that wall and you already have a roof on top of it, it's not feasible. That's a huge scope creep. You basically demolish the half of the house to change. So the larger and more complex the projects get, it might be an issue, time scale wise and feature wise. So scope creep on project level is definitely dangerous. I think also documentation. People don't like not having documentation for some reason. Agile promotes communication over documentation, and sometimes it's good because maybe you work externally, or maybe you are in, I don't know, Silicon Valley, and the average lifespan of a developer is like a year probably, or even less. There's huge churn in there, and you have no documentation, no processes. How do you onboard someone? It's impossible. So you have to have some processes, some documentation. I guess it kind of falls under that umbrella of as and when needed. So if you see that there's a need, then you create it, and that's still Agile because you needed to do that. But if you just take it as face value and no communication over documentation, and then you onboard someone just on a video call, I think that won't work well.
So something that comes to my mind when you you mentioned lawyers not being able to work in Agile, and then you say things about documentation. I think so maybe you're right, but again, still going back to another point that you said about banking app. So those 3 points, right? Lawyers, banking app, and documentation put together. So banking app is being built in Agile, like 100%, right? And at some point, they need to. Well, they found the problem. They agreed on the potential solution that they want to build. So that's the feature now. But that feature needs, someone's approval from the lawyer's perspective. So now you need to involve a lawyer into the Agile project, and probably documentation is the glue for it, right? So what I'm saying is you have internally, your production team has that feature nailed down, but now it's time for the lawyer to have their say. So what you do, you probably write some kind of documentation about that feature only because it's needed for the lawyer to understand what that feature is supposed to do, so that they can actually understand, get into your mindset, and get back with the comments so that it's all compliant, the feature, right? So I would imagine this is the perfect scenario that proves that documentation has place in Agile world, but only when it's actually necessary. Because Agile has so many ceremonies, which is another topic for an hour, that there's no reason to write stuff down. Yes, probably if someone comes up with an idea, a process improvement, stuff like that, retrospectively, you might want to write it down so it doesn't escape the memory. But while it's going, the project, you meet up daily, you meet up weekly. I mean, I have a friend who works in an Agile company, and they meet twice a day, right? So it's just depends on the company what works for them. But frankly, that change from writing stuff down to just simply communicating verbally is just such a no-brainer after a while. I love it. It's so simple, and it gets people on board much quicker. Even if someone new joins the team, you get them into a couple of those daily stand-ups, you get them into retrospective meeting, and all of a sudden they just get it. And they are in the known as opposed to in the unknown. Do you think that's fair assessment?
Yeah, I think so. I think the only issue I would have with that is, well, perhaps in banking apps you have fully cross-functional teams, so you have a lawyer per every team.
Sure.
I think it might be not feasible because it's kind of extreme, but that circles back to the issue of scaling to an organization. And if you have a lawyer team and they can't be, you can't have a lawyer on your team, then you have that conflict of someone working in waterfall and not being able to commit to those ceremonies.
Yeah.
And you still have to go back to them. You probably only develop things once they are approved, so part of the process is not agile. And only maybe only the development is agile, but yeah, that's a good point. If you are able to have that fully cross-functional team, then that's perfect. That works everywhere. But yeah, it's not always possible to do that.
So how do you deal with someone who's not agile, but you need their input? And assume it's a government, right? Like you can't get government to do anything quickly. And you gotta wait a month for the response to your claim or whatever that is. Do you just stop the project, or do you work on something else in the meantime? Like, how do you adapt to that situation?
It really depends when it happens. If you can get that approval previous to starting work, that's perfect. If it's in the middle, I guess that's a blocker for a feature or maybe entire product. So you have to adapt really to hard to give you a rule of thumb here.
Okay, so just get a sense of
the situation.
I'm just thinking,
because you don't. It doesn't have to be a lawyer. It doesn't have to be even an internal problem, as you've mentioned, government.
Yeah.
Maybe you build a banking app and you have integrations with PayPal.
Yeah.
And what if they say that's crap, or we can't work with that? We would need to change our API, or and we won't do that. But then again, you have, on the other hand, you have the benefit of iteration, because if you didn't build that, then maybe they would never know that there's an issue. So it's really a fine balance.
Well,
here.
Someone might just poke you at this point and say, okay, if you knew that you would need lawyer's attention, why not poke him like at the beginning of the project and give them a heads up, rather than just wait until you actually need it.
That's what I've mentioned. You just work on pre-approved features. But if you have an idea mid-sprint or mid-project, and then you need that feedback, that's a bit of a pain.
Yeah. But I guess until you get to that point when you need their feedback, you won't know that you need their feedback.
Yeah.
Because that's a bit, again, very agile. That some people probably look down upon things like that. Like, okay, that's not very ideal, is it? But then we're not trying to be ideal. We're trying to be reactive,
improve every single day.
Yeah. So you guys, listeners, you can probably understand why this is a challenging change to make from.
Yeah.
But I believe in you. You're fine. One other thing I wanted to touch upon before we wrap this up is zero distance team.
Yeah.
Right. So can you bring that concept closer to us a bit?
Yeah. So it's basically a concept that you can, as a client, you can reach everyone on the team that you work with externally. So with us, our client could email anyone a question and they would get answered. They wouldn't get pushed from one department to the other. And it's also that example with developers doing customer support, that that's zero distance, that they are in touch with a customer, and they know that if they screw up a feature, then they will get that call at 3 a.m. maybe, or whatever. They will have to stay up to answer those tickets. So that also promotes technical excellence and just understanding customers.
Sure.
Because that's really a hard thing. You can have a feature like, I don't know, a slider, and okay, that's fine, but what does it solve? Or you have a feature like, I don't know, adding padding somewhere.
Yeah.
fine, we understand what that is, but what does that solve? Maybe the text is not legible because of a lack of padding. Okay, that's better, but maybe padding is not the solution. Maybe smaller font is the solution. So you should never come at it from the point of features. And if you are in zero distance relationship, you understand what your customers need, basically.
I think it might be also worth mentioning that, I don't know if that fall, what I'm about to say, under the zero distance team concept, but would it help to bring everyone involved in the project to meetings with the client, and also any meetings that are related to decision making? So would you have developers and designers in the same room?
Yeah, definitely. Maybe not always, but it helps. The more touch points you get, the better it is. Obviously, we are flawed as humans, so maybe we will pass on information in the wrong way. Maybe you will come to a call with a client that has a great idea and they want to call right now because they want to add it to the current sprint even.
Yeah.
And they come to you and they explain it to you and you're like, I'm not sure we can do that, blah, blah, blah. And maybe if you had a developer in mind, he would be like, oh, I've discovered this amazing API yesterday. That's perfect for that. So yeah, so there are benefits. You don't have to do it exclusively, and just whatever fits the situation. I think that's just adapt and learn and improve.
Well, I'll play devil's advocate for a second then.
Yeah.
First of all, is communication skills.
Mm-hmm.
And second, actually stick to the first one for now.
Yeah.
Before I mix it up. So you literally just said, I've discovered an amazing API, and I can see just empty stare from the client, like,
oh, I think,
like,
yeah.
What?
Well, maybe that's not what they say, but maybe they did discover that, and they just say, yeah, we can solve your issue.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, you would say, yeah, I don't think we can do that because you are not aware of those new solutions that are out there, and developers are in the touch constantly.
Yeah. So I think what people struggle to do is to explain their expertise in plain English.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
I'm sorry, developers, I'm one of you, so I'm just gonna say it out loud because I belong. Is that you do that too? I can hear that jargon going all the time on Twitter, LinkedIn, and people are like, I don't get it.
Echo chamber.
Yeah, echo chamber, exactly. You think they get it, but they don't. So I guess it's a good idea, but it needs a bit more awareness of how you communicate with the client.
Yeah.
And perhaps that could, we could organize some kind of internal training, or just make people aware that whatever they say, clients won't understand your day-to-day language. You need to translate it for them, and that's probably often the case when you try to sell your ideas to stakeholders, like higher ups, right?
Yeah.
You are, say, a marketer, you know all the kind of lingo, but you go to them, say that in your presentation, and be like, okay, but what do I get from it? Like, that'd be the question. What's the benefit for me to invest in that idea? So you need to keep it simple, keep it basic, I guess. And my other objection to that is, doesn't that create chaos in comms with the client? See, so last example we had, you get an email, I get an email, and then someone else sends email to all of us. So now we have 3 threads. One was on Basecamp, 2 of them were on email, that are completely disconnected. There perhaps overlap in people attached to the conversation, but there are some individuals that were completely out of the loop, or just belong to one of those threads. Like, how do you patch that up? How do you keep everyone aligned when you have those multiple touch points?
Yeah, I guess it depends. In that example, that was a brand new person that didn't know how to communicate with us exactly. So you have a process for that. Again, you need some processes, even though Agile limits the need for documentation. You need a process for that. You need to onboard the right people, and in the end, what's the worst that can happen? You have the same request. You're saying, yeah, it was flagged by X. We are working on it. That's one liner. Yeah. So I think it's quite flexible.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, I think we can wrap this up.
Cool.
I don't have any other topics. Where can people find you online?
On NerdCow.co.uk.
On NerdCow.co.uk. Yeah, but I think
on LinkedIn.
You're on LinkedIn. So
maybe on Twitter soon-ish.
Yeah. All right. So go check out David. He keeps sharing his wisdom quite almost daily, I think, at least.
Hopefully.
And if you see NerdCow post, you should know that was David, not me.
Or Buffer.
Or a Buffer. Thanks, Buffer. All right, guys. Thanks so much for the talk.
Yeah. Thank you.
Cheers.